All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be back.
So today we're going to zero in on a pivotal moment, really, in the story we've been looking at. And that is the lead up to and including the sentencing of Jesus, as recounted in the 19th chapter of John 19.
Right. Yeah, we're really going deep into the text here, the biblical text.
And it's fascinating to me when you look at this chapter, just how many different resources and materials are out there. I mean, just tons of commentaries, different translations, study Bibles with all kinds of notes unpacking every single word, maps, dictionaries, videos, just a huge amount of information.
Right. Yeah, it's almost overwhelming if you think about it.
It really is. Hundreds and hundreds of entries, across all these different resources, all focusing on this relatively short passage.
It just shows how significant this narrative is.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for today, our goal is really to try to cut through all that, all those layers of interpretation, and get right to the core of what John 19 is actually presenting. And we want to try to be very methodical about it. Almost like we're piecing together a historical timeline, to understand the sequence of events, the key moments, and what the immediate context was for those moments.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
So let's jump right into it, starting with Pilate's initial actions.
Okay.
The text says he had Jesus flogged.
Right.
Now, what was the typical significance of this kind of punishment in Roman practice?
Well, flogging, it served multiple purposes, really.
Yeah.
It was definitely a pretty brutal form of punishment.
Yeah.
Often meant to just weaken the condemned before, in execution.
Right.
It could also be used as a way to get confessions out of people.
Oh, yeah.
Or, in some cases, it was just about inflicting pain and humiliation.
Right, just to
Torture, basically.
just to really break someone down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after this, the Roman soldiers, they do something, it's pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
They make this crown of thorns and put it on Jesus' head.
Right.
And then dress him in this purple robe.
Uh-huh.
And they're calling him King of the Jews.
Yeah.
But they're also slapping him and mocking him, so it's really this awful scene of degradation.
Right.
What do you think the intent was behind this specific form of torment?
Well, I mean, it seems pretty clear, that it was a cruel parody of royalty.
Right.
I mean, the purple robe, that's supposed to be like royal attire.
Yeah.
The crown of thorns obviously is totally mocking.
A twisted crown.
Yeah, exactly. It was all designed to make fun of Jesus and his claim to be the king of the Jews.
Right.
And it was also probably a way for the soldiers, to just express their contempt, maybe even entertain themselves a little bit.
Just a way to kind of blow off some steam.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, pretty brutal.
Yeah, it is.
And then Pilate brings Jesus out to this crowd that's gathered, and he makes this really interesting statement. He says, look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. So he's seemingly trying to declare Jesus innocent.
Right.
What do you make of his motivation here?
Well, it does seem like Pilate, he wasn't convinced that Jesus was actually guilty of anything, at least not according to Roman law.
Right.
He might have been looking for a way out of this situation, a way to appease the crowd without actually, having to execute Jesus.
So maybe he's caught between what he believes legally and the pressure he's facing.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like there's some conflict there.
Yeah, that comes across very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that moment, it's so striking, where Jesus is presented, he's wearing the crown of thorns, he's got that purple robe on, and Pilate just says, here's the man.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think he was hoping to achieve with that, that visual presentation?
Maybe he thought, that by seeing Jesus in this state, humiliated, suffering, that it would make the crowd feel pity, maybe satisfy them enough that they wouldn't demand crucifixion.
To kind of take the edge off.
Right, but it seems like he might have misjudged how much they actually hated Jesus.
Yeah, maybe he underestimated, especially the religious authorities.
Yeah, for sure.
Because their reaction, it's immediate and it's fierce. They just shout, crucify, crucify.
Right, no hesitation there.
No softening at all, just straight to that. So their demand is unwavering at this point.
Yeah, it seems like despite Pilate's declaration and despite seeing Jesus all beat up, they just wanted him dead.
Right. Their objective was clear.
Mm-hmm.
And Pilate then makes this really interesting counteroffer. He says, you take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him.
That's odd.
So it's like he's washing his hands of it, but he knows they don't have the authority to crucify someone under Roman rule.
Right, they can't just go and do that.
So what's going on there?
It seems like a political move, like he's acknowledging their desire, But he's also reiterating that legally he doesn't see a reason to crucify Jesus.
Right.
So maybe he's challenging them, because he knows they can't actually do it themselves.
All in their bluff.
Yeah, maybe trying to get them to say what they really want, what their real goal is.
Right. Interesting. And that leads to the escalation.
Yeah.
And a change in their argument.
Okay.
They say, we have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God.
Ah, so now it's a religious thing.
Yeah, now it's a religious offense.
Right.
So how does that change the dynamic for Pilate?
Well, this brings in a whole other layer of complexity,
Yeah.
Now they're bringing in their own religious legal system. They're saying Jesus committed blasphemy, which, according to their law, meant death.
Wow.
So this probably made Pilate even more uneasy, because it hinted at these deeper religious and maybe even political tensions within the Jewish community.
Which could cause problems for Rome.
Exactly. It could have had wider repercussions for Roman rule.
Right, so there's a lot more at stake now.
Yeah.
And the text tells us that when Pilate heard this, that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, he became even more afraid.
Oh.
He goes back inside, and he questions Jesus privately.
Okay.
He asks, where did he come from?
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus doesn't answer him.
Interesting.
Why do you think Jesus remains silent at this crucial moment?
Well, there are a few possibilities.
Yeah.
Maybe Jesus felt like talking to Pilate was just pointless, like the outcome was already decided, especially with all the influence from the religious leaders in the crowd. It's like, what's the point of arguing?
His silence could also be seen as like a dignified refusal to engage with Pilate on his terms, or even maybe, a reflection of how he understood his own divine purpose, something that wouldn't be swayed by Pilate's authority.
Right, like it was all part of a bigger plan.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
So Pilate, clearly frustrated.
Yeah.
He then asserts his power.
Okay.
He says to Jesus, don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a direct reminder of his Roman authority.
Yeah, he's making it very clear who's in charge. He's the Roman governor. He has power over life and death.
Right.
Probably expected Jesus to, plead for his life after that.
Yeah, like a typical response.
Right.
But Jesus' answer, it's pretty profound. He says, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin.
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah, there's a real theological depth to this statement.
It is.
What's the key takeaway here?
Well, Jesus is saying that all earthly authority, even Pilate's, ultimately comes from God.
Oh, I see.
He's also saying that those who turned him in, they're more guilty than Pilate.
Because Pilate's just working within the system.
Right. He's operating within his given authority.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then the story shifts to more political maneuvering.
Okay.
The Jewish leaders, they change their tactics and they start shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar.
Uh-oh, that's a direct threat.
Right. It's a direct threat to Pilate's standing with Rome. How effective would that kind of political pressure have been on a Roman governor like Pilate?
Oh, that's a huge threat. Staying in good standing with Rome, with the emperor, that was essential for any Roman governor.
Absolutely.
An accusation of disloyalty or not stopping a rebellion, that could have serious consequences for Pilate.
Like losing his job.
Yeah, or even worse.
Wow, so this political angle, it probably hit him harder than all the religious arguments.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And Pilate's reaction seems to confirm that he brings Jesus out again, and he sits on the judge's seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, or Gabbatha in Aramaic.
Right.
And the timing here is also important. It's the day of preparation for the Passover, around noon.
Okay. And why is that significant?
Well, the day of preparation, that was the day before the Passover Sabbath.
Right.
A really important holy day for the Jewish people.
Yes.
And it was customary to wrap up any legal proceedings and executions before the Sabbath started to avoid ritual defilement.
Okay.
So the fact that it's already noon, that means time is running out.
Right. They need to make a decision.
And a decision needs to be made before the Sabbath begins.
Yeah.
So in what seems like a last attempt to kind of sway the crowd, Pilate declares, here is your king.
Okay.
But their response, it's not what he was hoping for at all.
No.
They cry out, take him away, crucify him.
Oh, wow.
And then they say something really telling. We have no king but Caesar. What's the significance of that declaration?
Well, that's a complete rejection of Jesus' claim to be the Messiah.
Yeah.
And they're very clearly stating their loyalty to Rome.
Right, so they're putting Pilate in a corner.
Yeah.
He's tried appealing to justice, to pity, but now they're aligning themselves with Roman interests.
And he can't really ignore that.
Exactly. Yeah, so with all this pressure from both religious and political sides, Pilate finally hands Jesus over to be crucified.
It's a tragic turning point.
It really is.
I mean, he seems to think Jesus is innocent. But in the end, he gives in to the pressure.
He does, yeah.
The Jewish leaders, they played their hand well.
They did.
They used religious law. They threatened political trouble.
Right.
And it worked.
It did.
It's really sad.
It is.
Yeah.
And then the narrative moves quickly to the execution itself.
Okay.
The soldiers take charge, and Jesus carries his own cross to a place called the Skull, or Golgotha in Aramaic.
Right.
This image of him carrying his own instrument of execution, it's pretty powerful.
It is. It really shows how much he was going through, you know, physically and emotionally.
Yeah, in his final hours.
Yeah.
And Golgotha, the place of the skull.
Yeah.
It was probably a well-known execution site.
Oh, right.
Outside the city walls.
Public execution makes sense.
And then Pilate has this notice written and fastened to the cross.
Okay.
It says, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And it's written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek.
So everyone can understand it.
Right. A wide audience would be able to read it.
Yeah.
It almost feels like a subtle act of defiance from Pilate.
I see what you mean.
You know, like he's making a statement.
Maybe. Yeah, by putting it in all those languages. He's making sure everyone sees what Jesus was accused of.
Right.
It could be him asserting his authority one last time.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little dig at the people who forced him to make this decision.
Like a final word.
Right.
And of course, the chief priests, they object.
They're not going to like that.
No, they tell Pilate, don't write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be King of the Jews.
Oh, wow.
So they're trying to control the narrative even at this point.
Yeah, even in this final act.
Exactly.
They still want to discredit Jesus.
Yeah.
Make sure no one thinks he was a real king.
Right. They understand the power of how things look.
Right. Public perception.
Yeah.
It's all about how people see things.
Yeah. And Pilate stands firm.
Okay.
He says, what I have written, I have written.
Final word.
It's his final word on the matter.
Why do you think he's so stubborn now?
Maybe he's just reached his limit, you know? He's been pushed around, forced into a decision he probably didn't want to make.
Right.
So maybe he feels like he needs to assert himself on this one last detail.
Okay, like a last stand.
Yeah, or maybe it's just that Roman thing, you know, once a decree is made.
Right, it's final.
It's final, that's it.
Yeah.
Then the passage describes the soldiers dividing Jesus's clothes into 4 shares, and they cast lots for his seamless undergarment.
Okay.
And the text says this fulfilled Scripture, specifically Psalm 22.1.
Which is about dividing garments by casting lots.
Right, so what's the significance of that detail?
Well, it connects these events to Old Testament prophecy.
Okay.
For the early followers of Jesus, this would have confirmed that everything was happening according to God's plan.
Right, like it was foretold.
Yeah, exactly.
And the seamless tunic itself, it was probably valuable enough for them to cast lots for it.
Yeah, definitely worth something.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then we see the witnesses at the cross. Jesus' mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene.
Right.
A small group of women who were devoted to Jesus,
right,
present during this horrific event.
It really emphasizes the personal tragedy of it all.
It does, yeah. These women represent that close circle of followers who stayed loyal even in this darkest moment.
Yeah.
Shows their deep connection to Jesus and their grief.
Absolutely.
And there's a really moving moment where Jesus speaks to his mother and the disciple whom he loved. And he entrusts them to each other.
Wow.
It's an act of care and compassion amidst all this suffering.
It is. It shows how much he cared about his mother.
Yeah.
And his close relationship with this disciple who's traditionally thought to be John, the author of this gospel.
Right.
It's a powerful moment, you know, seeing his humanity even as he's dying.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then the story moves towards the end.
Okay.
Jesus says, I am thirsty. And again, this is noted as fulfilling Scripture.
Right.
He's offered wine vinegar on a sponge and attached to a hyssop stalk.
Right.
And after he receives it, he says, it is finished.
Wow.
Bows his head and dies.
Powerful.
What's the significance of those final words? It is finished.
It's often interpreted as Jesus declaring that his mission on earth, the work God gave him to do, is complete.
Like it's all done.
Yeah, his teachings, miracles, and ultimately his death for the forgiveness of sins, all of it.
Wow.
The powerful statement.
It is.
Yeah.
And the account then goes on to describe the confirmation of Jesus' death.
Okay.
Because it was the day of preparation, and the next day was a special Sabbath, the Jewish leaders wanted the bodies removed quickly.
Right.
They asked Pilate to have their legs broken.
To hasten death.
Yeah.
I see.
Why was the timing of the Sabbath so critical here?
Well, the Passover Sabbath, it was a particularly holy day.
Yeah.
And Jewish law prohibited certain work on the Sabbath.
Right.
Leaving the crucified bodies there, it would have been seen as defiling this sacred time.
So they were very concerned about that.
Oh, yeah. They had to get the bodies down before the Sabbath started.
Right. So the soldiers, they broke the legs of the two men who were crucified with Jesus.
Okay.
But when they came to Jesus, they found he was already dead. So they didn't break his legs.
And again, that fulfills Scripture.
It does, yeah. The Scripture that says not one of his bones will be broken.
Right.
Instead, a soldier pierces his side with a spear.
Okay.
And John, the author, he emphasizes that he saw this happen.
He was there.
Yeah, he's testifying to it so others might believe.
Right.
And he points to another fulfilled Scripture. They will look on the one they have pierced.
Wow. So why is this eyewitness detail so important?
Well, it's crucial for the credibility of the account.
Right.
John is saying, I was there, I saw this.
He's a witness.
Yeah, it's an assertion of the historical reality of what happened.
Right.
And that detail about blood and water flowing from Jesus' side,
Yeah.
it's been interpreted in different ways, literally and symbolically. And of course, the fulfillment of another Scripture, that reinforces the theological significance for believers.
Yeah, it all ties together.
It does.
Very interesting.
And finally, the narrative ends with the burial.
Okay.
Joseph of Arimathea, a secret disciple of Jesus, he asks Pilate for the body.
Brave of him.
He was risking a lot.
Yeah.
And he's accompanied by Nicodemus, who brings a large amount of myrrh and aloes.
Wow, they were prepared.
They wrapped Jesus' body in linen strips with the spices, following Jewish burial customs.
Right.
And then they lay him in a new tomb in a garden near the crucifixion site. The text notes the proximity and the urgency because of the approaching Sabbath.
Yeah, they had to move quickly.
They did, yeah. So what does this act of burial signify?
Well, it shows how devoted Joseph was to Jesus, even though he was a member of the Sanhedrin.
Right, he was part of the group that condemned Jesus.
Exactly, but he still honored him in death.
Yeah.
And all those spices Nicodemus brought, they were expensive,
Yeah, a sign of respect.
It shows how highly they thought of Jesus, even after he was dead.
Right, and the new tomb, that was also significant. It meant Jesus' final resting place was separate, unique.
I see.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into John 19, we've gone through this really intense sequence of events, from Pilate's initial hesitation to the final act of burial.
It's a powerful narrative.
It is.
What really stands out to me is how religious and political forces work together to bring about this outcome.
Yeah.
The Jewish leaders, they used religious law. They threatened political trouble.
Right.
And they pushed Pilate into making a decision, even though he didn't seem to want to do it.
Yeah, they were very strategic.
They were.
And the details in this account are amazing.
Yeah, it's very specific.
The locations, the languages on the inscription, the seamless garment, the piercing of Jesus' side.
It's all very vivid.
It is. Those details bring the narrative to life and make you think deeper.
Absolutely. It's not just random facts. They add to the story, make it more complex, and people are still debating their meaning today.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is.
So this deep dive into John 19, it's given us a clearer picture of the events leading up to and right after the crucifixion.
It has.
At least as presented in this specific gospel.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with a question.
Okay, I like questions.
How did the different motivations of everyone involved, Pilate wanting to protect himself and Roman authority, the Jewish leaders wanting to uphold their laws and their idea of order, the soldiers just following orders, and Jesus's followers dealing with grief and uncertainty?
Right. Everyone had their own reasons.
Yeah. How did all these desires and actions come together at this one moment?
At this crucial point in history.
It's a complex mix of motivations.
It is.
That shaped this pivotal event.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It does. It really does.
It's fascinating.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Yeah, this was great.
Really appreciate your insights.
Anytime.
All right. Until next time.
See you then.
Take care.
You too.